right, looks like it's 4:33, and at this time we'll call the meeting of the Kansas City Commission to order. Mayor Pro Tem, would you lead us?
Yeah. You all pray. Holy Father, thank you so much for all that you do for our city, Father. We thank you for the moisture and ask that you keep the wind. Father, we pray for the continued protection of the men and women that serve here for the city of Canyon. Father, thank you for the protection of our citizens. Help us when we, as we make decisions for the future of our city, and help us when we mess it up. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That takes us to the approval of the minutes of the meeting of December 4th, 2023.
Motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve. All in favor signify by raising your right hand. Opposed, like sign. Motion passes. Takes us to item number 5, public comments from interested citizens.
Mayor, nobody has signed in.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Takes us to the first reading of resolution number 01-2024, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Canyon approving a project funding agreement between the Lumberyard Ltd., a Texas limited partnership acting by and through its general partner, the Lumberyard Management LLC, a limited liability corporation, and the Crew Entertainment Ltd., and Canyon Economic Development Corporation relating to direct financial assistance and job opportunities for new business in Canyon. Stephanie?
Hey guys, it's nice to see y'all back from the holidays. Very excited about this project. We've been all working on it. I know the city and the EDC and the crew all with the Lumberyard. So with that being said, we are asking for with the resolution for this for no exceeding $500,000. 450 is actually going to go to the actual direct assistance to go to equipment, fire suppression system, and some other things, and the other 50,000 will be going to the 20+ jobs that they will be adding for the Lumberyard. We did have a hearing on January 4th, last Thursday, and we had no opposition for this.
It's going to provide some good opportunities for Main Street, the city, and all too, and Chamber for our events.
We've already even scheduled their first concerts in May, so that's why we're pushing this pretty fast. Can't tell you who yet, but it will be a good one that everybody will be proud, and hopefully we'll have people staying the night and eating in our restaurants and shopping in our shops. That's just one to come.
How many full-time employees would there be?
So we're looking from 17, and then when we have concerts nights, they'll be closer to 50 to 75. Any other questions?
Any questions?
Thank you guys, appreciate y'all.
Thank you. This is the first reading, so no action to be taken. Item number 7, presentation of Section 3 goals and requirements as it relates to the city's Texas Community Development Block Grant, TXCDBG Water System Improvements Project, CDB 21-0143, to include information on employment opportunities of low and very low income persons as well as residents residing in the community. It's like Jarian's
No, he's not here.
presenting this. Okay.
We're just gonna go over the CDBG program just briefly and quickly.
Okay.
So there's a bunch of information in your packet. Basically, this is awarded a grant award for $350,000 through the Texas Department of Agriculture, who administers the Community Development Block Grant on behalf of HUD, Housing and Urban Development. Our project specifically, I believe, had about 80 different questionnaires as y'all may or may not know, we have to go out and actually do questionnaires to basically conflict with the census tract information because it indicates that our census is not low to moderate income. And so we go to low to moderate income areas for qualified projects. We did that in 2020, Mr. Reese, is that right? And so we went out and got questionnaires, about 80 people, to make this project eligible. Just so y'all know, when we originally did that, the project total was about $770,000, with us doing about $425,000 of local match. The project is for water and sewer improvements of existing lines in that area, in those neighborhoods. All in all, just a reminder that this program is aimed at housing and low to moderate income. We have met those requirements at this point. So, other than that, that's pretty much all I have to add.
It's approximately 60 services.
It's in, it's in the normal subdivision. So it's not in original town side, I don't think. I think it's in the original.
It's in a little bit of, or something like that.
No, that's what it was called, normal
Addition, yeah.
normal addition. That was the subdivision, which is west of 23rd. I think that's it for this. Gretchen, do we need any action on this one?
I believe so. Jerian just said we needed to present this information as part of the requirements for the receipt of the grant. So just make sure that you have the information. So it's a non-action, it's just informational.
Did you say 350,000 is the grant?
That's the grant, yeah. And we're about to go over the finances and the project scope itself. Dan will go over that in a second.
Well, with that then, we'll go to item number 8 to consider and take appropriate action on award to the lowest and best bid for the City of Canyon's TXCDBG Community Development Project, number CDB21-0143. Dan?
Thank you, Mayor. Just to kind of continue what Joe was alluding to, in 2020, we went out and surveyed these properties and to, get their income information to verify the
Low to moderate income.
low to mod income for the requirement for the grant. It's about 7 blocks of water main and about 6 blocks of sewer main that we intend to replace. We started on this project, I think, in 2020. We may even started the first application in 2019. I can't remember exactly, but we've been working on it off and on for about 3 years, and I think this was kind of awarded on the second cycle that we applied for. They come in 2-year cycles. If you want to, on the second page, or the page after my memo in your packet kind of shows where the project is located. It's basically between 6th and 8th Avenues, in those alleys between 19th Street and 23rd Street. There is an additional block of water line that goes across 23rd Street that'll be bored. That's why we have more water than we do sewer. And on the sewer side, we're gonna try something a little different than what we normally do. You can imagine if you have a trench for 3 blocks down an alley to do the water with, you don't really want a trench 10 feet away to do the sewer with to replace it. So we're gonna do pipe bursting on the sewer, which is they call it a trenchless technology, where you basically go inside the existing pipe and pull a new pipe in behind it, which is a good thing. And luckily it came in basically a wash as far as price, as whether it's open cut or whether it's trenchless. So we were fortunate there. Low bid was $1,051,200, I believe it was, submitted by Emerald Utility Contractors. That was the lowest of 4 bids, and you can tell that if you look at the bid tabulation sheet, which I think is the last page of my part of the packet, you can see kind of the way the bids ranged. MH Civil, they look like they're pretty busy because it was basically double the bid. So, and then the day's bid were also included there too. You see, you wanted 220 days to do the project. The project's been in the CIP ever since the CIP was invented, so we were ready for it financially.
except for the overage, and which was about $273,000, which is about 25% over our estimate, which is kind of what we're used to in this day and time. So, and those additional funds, we kind of had to scramble around a little bit to try to figure out what we're going to get the extra money, and we've decided in-house basically to take that money out of the ARPA funds that are already on hand, and then that'll come from the 4th Street tank project, and then we would recommend that we re-budget that money back for next year's budget to put that money back in there when we do the 4th Street ground storage tank.
We're hoping to know those bids probably in the next 2-3 months bid out. So we'll know those bids. More than likely, that project will have a front window, so we won't start that project for 8 to 12 months once that bid is when we get into tank season.
That's about all I had. We'd recommend award bid to AUC in the amount of $1,051,200.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Danny,
Thank you.
all in favor of the motion, award the grant to Amarillo Utility Contractor, signify by raising your right hand. Opposed, like sign.
Thank y'all.
Thank you. Item number 9, consider and take appropriate action on ordinance number 1196, an ordinance of the City Commission of the City of Canyon, Texas, amending the city's budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2022, and ending September 30th, 2023, as adopted by ordinance number 1161, providing for an increase of expected revenues, expenditures, and transfer of certain funds, providing that prior parts of ordinance number 1161 inconsistent with or in conflict with any of the provisions of this ordinance are hereby expressly repealed to the extent of any such inconsistency or conflict, providing for severability and providing for an effective date. Joe?
Thank you. This is our annual budget amendment, and just to kind of remind you what the purpose of this is. At the close of the fiscal year, we have budgeted for our expenditures and revenue based on a cash basis. When we get through with our fiscal year, we then convert all of that to the accrual basis for our financial statement reporting. So a lot of these amendments are associated with that, but they also do reflect what we knew 18 months ago when we were budgeting to what things actually happened. And so part of these adjustments are due to that. And so I'm going to go through these and highlight quickly some of the significant ones. Most of these I spoke about last month when I gave you the financial statements for September 30, but I'll kind of revisit those. First of all, in revenues, the general fund, we had a $262,000 increase in the fire department grants. We didn't get that grant that we'd applied for the air pack equipment. We also had a decrease in the budgeted transfer from utility fund of $974,000, and I explained that last month due to the lack of excess cash available in the utility fund to be able to make those transfers. We had an increase of $107,000 ad valorem taxes. That's mainly due to our conservative budgeting for the collection rate of the property taxes. We budget for 98.5% collection rate, and the actual is about 99.6%. We also have in there an increase of $414,000 for other financing sources. And again, this is a accrual basis accounting adjustment. Anytime that we enter into a new lease, governmental accounting standards require us to recognize revenue for the full net present value of the lease payments, and then an offsetting expenditure for the same amount. So this represents 2 leases that I'll mention on the expense side here in a minute. Total decrease in budgeted revenues to the general fund by these amendments is $797,000 decrease. On the expenditure side, the general fund, police department had a $62,000 increase in budgeted equipment. This was due to a grant award that was received for bullet resistant vests Shields, and also a crash forensics equipment grant that was received. So this was funded by grant funds. And then on the capital outlay for leased property, this is $185,000 on the expense side of the expenditure of the lease that I mentioned earlier on revenue. The fire department, we have a decrease in budgeted equipment purchases. Again, this is the grant we didn't get for the air packs. So we had budgeted for that expense, we didn't get the grant, so we did not make that purchase. Street department had a $70,000 decrease. This was associated with the microsurfacing project. Parks department had a $229,000 increase in capital outlay. And again, that's for leased equipment. There was a significant delay and waiting on the receipt of that equipment due to COVID. Again, this is the net present value of the payments on those leases. Planning and development, we had an $86,000 decrease in budgeted expense for salaries. We had planned for a longer overlap between the two directors with the transition that was made there in that department this past fiscal year. Landfill expenditures, we amended the increase for $65,000. This is mainly due to a rate increase that was received. We had a $34.58 per ton rate for fiscal year 22-23 as opposed to $32.32 for 21-22. We also have reflected in these amendments $45,833 for an increase in contractual services and supplies in our contingency department. And that's directly related to cleanup efforts after the Tierra Blanca flood event, which we hadn't, of course, budgeted for. Overall, we have a budgeted increase in budgeted expenditures of $81,000, and the net effect of all these in the general fund is a decrease of $878,000 for the fund balance. And the utility fund, water receipts, budgeted. We had to amend that to lower that by $262,000. This again was related to the significant rainfall in June and July. One of our peak months for water usage, and so that impacted our revenues significantly. Expenditures, we had an increase of $153,000, and utility billing, that's mainly due to transaction fees incurred on merchant services. We were delayed in implementing the electronic payment application that we now have in place that is saving us a significant amount on these transaction fees, but we had planned for that being in place a lot earlier. Directly related to the decrease in the water revenue, our purchase of water from the city of Amarillo was down also. So we're amending by $247,000 there to decrease that expense. And then the most significant adjustment in the utility fund, we have $1.5 million decrease in debt service. And this is just an adjustment between cash flow expense and accrual accounting. This represents the principal payment on the debt, which for financial statements is reported in the balance sheet as a reduction to liabilities. So even though we're amending the budget for this, we did expend that cash and made those debt service payments on our outstanding certificates of obligation. And then also the amendment to the transfers out of $1.3 million. Again, that's a $974 decrease for a transfer to the general fund and $105,000 decrease for transfer to the Gulf. Again, just due to not having that excess cash available. Overall, the amendments for the utility fund are to decrease expenses by $2.8 million, and the net effect is a $2.5 million increase in net position. Most of the amendments for the other funds are pretty minor. We did do some adjustments on our CIP funds. For the CIP general fund, we had an increase of $707,000 for donations that were received for the Kylie Heiner Memorial Playground. We hadn't budgeted for that. And then also the related expenditures to construct that playground of a little over $1 million. And the extension of 18th Street that was associated with that. And then in the CIP utility fund, we had budgeted for all those projects starting, the ARPA projects, the sewer main, and also 4th Street Pump Station. And those projects didn't start yet, so we were a little bit ahead of the game budgeting for those. So we're amending to take those expenditures out of the budget. Again, the most significant impact of all these amendments will affect our schedule of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance, budget to actual, which is a part of our annual comprehensive financial report. And this is opined on by our outside auditors. Also, if we didn't make these amendments, we would have significant variances between amended budget and actual, and that would require some specific disclosures in our annual financial statement. So by making these amendments, it shows that the commission has approved how things ended up finally with the formal ordinance on amending the budget. Are there any questions? If not, that's all I have.
Excited on me, okay?
It's hard to make it exciting.
You know, I guess one question, we were able to make it all work without those transfers from the.
We did. I mean, this came up in I will make this a little exciting. When we were doing our interview with the outside firm that was rating us for that bond issue that we just did, they did ask us quite a bit of questions on that, about the differences. We sent them preliminary financial statements, and so they saw these variances. And so they questioned us about that, and that was a concern to them. They didn't change our rating for us, but it did generate some questions. But we're able to cover it. We had the reserves in the general fund to cover for it. But as we get that, the main contributing factor is that accumulated liability from the Gulf Fund that had accumulated for so many years. We paid that down significantly in the same fiscal year. So that's really where a lot of our excess cash went. But then those other factors, the rainfall and the water revenues being down, is just a lot of factors that have affected the same direction. So that's kind of where we're at. Audit started today, by the way, so the majority of the journal entries are in. I may still have to follow up with 1 or 2 amendments after, but hopefully this is by far the majority of it. That's all I've got.
All right, thank you. Any other questions?
Ordinance 1196, amending fiscal year 22-23 operating budget be adopted.
Second. Motion and a second to pass ordinance number 1196. All in favor, signify by raising your right hand. Opposed, like sign. The motion passes. Thank you. All right, takes us to item number 10. Hear an update on progress regarding implementation of go to item number 11 before we go through all that, since we've got folks here.
Yes, sir. That is your discretion.
Let's go to item number 11 and consider and take appropriate action on ordinance number 1197, an ordinance of the City of Canyon, Texas, removing real property from extraterritorial jurisdiction ETJ of the City of Canyon on petition of landowners and reducing the ETJ of the City of Canyon in accordance with such action and providing for an effective date.
Sure. When this is over, make sure you thank the mayor, because item 10 was not going to be a short one.
I'll thank you ahead of time.
So on November 11th, the city of Canyon received a petition for release from extraterritorial jurisdiction pursuant to section 42.102 of the Texas Local Government Code. This is our second petition to release property from the ETJ. This is not one that we were surprised by. You all know that it follows a release from our city limits for a section of property that is part of this parcel that we released from our corporate city limits a couple months ago. And so this is the follow-up application to remove that same land area from our ETJ. They have met all of the requirements of the ordinance that we've adopted to apply for removal from the ETJ, to submit that petition. All of those documents are contained herein, including legal description of the property, a survey of the property to be removed, along with certifications of signatory authority for the property owners, being 2 LLCs, and formation documents for those LLCs. If you look after the ordinance, there are those attachments that show the map identifying the land area to be removed. It's directly north of the Canyon East neighborhood on Highway 217. This is an area that City of Canyon cannot afford to serve with public utilities at this time. And so they're asking to remove from the ETJ to move forward with different plans. Are there any specific questions? The property owners are here.
Mr. Mayor, I move we approve ordinance 1197.
Have a motion and second to approve ordinance number 1197. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, signify by raising your right hand. Opposed, like sign. The motion passes. All right. Then we will go back up and to item number 10 and hear an update on progress regarding the implementation of the City of Canyon Comprehensive Plan. Thank you all for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Awesome, thank you. So 5 years ago, well, I'll preface this. This is going to be kind of the Lucas show with John chiming in, as he does very expertly, on items that he's been working on, because this is really a process that he kicked off with Danny several years ago. And so I'll just give that preface. But 5 years ago, the City of Canyon adopted the comprehensive plan as ordinance number 1091. Just labeled the 2018 our comprehensive plan. Since that adoption, the city has made amazing progress in the implementation of the goals and action items associated with that plan. And every year, we try to bring an update to that plan and the progress of the implementation to this body to hear that update and ask any questions they have on specific items that either were accomplished, that are still in progress, or that we have not started yet. So I will be somewhat brief and kind of scroll through these. There are 91 action steps associated, so we're not going to go one by one. But I will just say overall, we kind of updated with a completion status, and over half of the identified recommendations are either complete or ongoing, with another 22% of those action items in progress. Of the 12 recommendations that have no progress marked in their status column, 9 of those are due specifically to budget constraints. There's also a couple of recommendations that we don't believe are relevant at this point due to changes since the adoption of that plan 5 years ago. It's important to also note that the implementation priorities from the advisory committee include the CIP plan, which was adopted, the courthouse and downtown development. The courthouse is obviously one of those budget constraint issues, but downtown development has moved significantly since the adoption, with the downtown master plan in place, the tiers in place, and then we're talking weekly on how we can work towards accomplishing more of that downtown plan. Revision of code and ordinances, we've done everything related to that in the plan, and I'll touch on that more.
Economic development, that was a big goal, and that's ongoing. That's always going to be one of the goals for this community. And then community image initiatives, and some of that has also been addressed with those code updates. So we're very excited to kind of go through this. As I said, I'll go kind of quickly. Some of the biggest things we've done in the last year are the adoption of our subdivision ordinances and zoning regulations, and that checks a lot of the boxes associated with those two updated regulations as complete. I'll make a note, everything in purple that says ongoing, from our perspective, those would be copied and pasted onto a comprehensive plan update. Those are goals that we feel like are really ongoing forever. An example would be to focus non-residential development around key and high visibility intersections. That's gonna be forever a goal of the city, even as those continue to fill out. Another example is considering options for multi-purpose uses in the future for public facilities. So that's ongoing. We're always going to be looking for new things that we can do in our public facilities. We now have the Kylie Heiner Playground. That's an example of implementation there. The pickleball courts are an example of some implementation there where we've adapted some existing infrastructure for a new popular use. On that second page, there's a lot of continuing and ongoing projects there. The EDC promoting new businesses, I don't think that's something Stephanie's ever going to stop doing. And so we just recognize that those are continual goals that we're going to have in our comprehensive planning process. Looking at the page after that, we are looking at some redevelopment plans and policies for key roads and intersections. That's something that we're having conversations with as an in-process action item, along with those specific design standards. So we've had a lot of conversations about what that might look like, how we can implement that. And, when we get into our Vision Zero process and have that safety action committee, that's going to be something we discuss with them too, is what does the public realm look like between private properties? What is the street, sidewalks, landscaping, all of that? What does that look like in the city of Canyon? On page 4, we've got several ongoing projects. I will highlight one that we've considered for removal. If you have any comments or questions on that, we'd love to hear it. Originally, that plan called for this entire neighborhood to be branded as the Civic Complex. We don't necessarily see that as a goal at this point. I know we've had a lot of conversations about additional facilities, and in some cases those are here, in some cases those are other places in the city. And as we continue to grow, especially for first responders, a lot of those facilities will need to be not just centralized, but also in other locations. So we feel like that's one that we can consider removing. We'd like to budget for sidewalk repairs every year to bring them up to ADA standards. That's kind of in conjunction with the image standard priority identified by the advisory group. That's something that we'd like to see, but also as a budgetary constraint. A lot of cities that have sidewalk programs, they adopt an ordinance, letting everybody know, especially in residential neighborhoods, your sidewalk is your responsibility. It has to be up to this standard. However, if you're under enforcement for that standard, we have this program where we can reimburse you up to a certain amount. And so that would be something we'd have to budget for in the future if we wanted to really jump into that sidewalk repair program, which I'd love to do at some point. Same thing with studying downtown drainage issues, budgeting for improvements. We are in process with that as we speak. That's something we talk about a lot. It's one of the major first projects that have been identified in the downtown master plan. It's kind of where everything has to start, because we can't really do anything on the surface until we address those drainage issues and get those to go through downtown. The feasibility of annexing and growth areas and things like that, that's ongoing, but also super limited by the state legislature as we can only work with people towards new growth in that direction. Page 6. We've got a chapter on transportation. There's a lot of things that are in process there. Our new subdivision ordinances kind of helps with certain functional classifications and things inside of development. We are working on updated mapping, and a thoroughfare plan is something we'd all like to see at some point that would be a little more formal than what we have in place now. On page 7, there's a lot of issues addressed there.
one of the things we've considered for removal is the congestion item that was addressed at 23rd and 4th Ave. That was something that was highlighted as an action item on that plan. At this point, we don't necessarily see that being a huge issue for City of Canyon. I think, the bigger issue is what we view and what we see at that intersection, but it doesn't necessarily have to do with any traffic congestion. It's more about what's happening in the public and private parcels off of the street there. So
is that different from if you are there at that intersection at the right time of day, you may wait through 3 lights or so too. I mean, it's for about 10, 15 minutes, but, when school's let out and when, 5 o'clock,
Yep.
I would consider congestion.
I would consider that congestion, but not anything that's inappropriate for that roadway based on the number of cars that we have going through our city. Yeah, and depending on which side you're coming from, right? If you're coming from the south side, you can usually hit the 5th Street light, or excuse me, the 5th Ave light too, and that kind of slows you down a little bit. But as someone that's my commute every day, living on 13th Ave, catching school traffic both ways, it's not something that I feel like is a major congestion issue that there's anything to necessarily be done with. Because that's people getting to Amarillo or coming back, or getting to school and coming back. And there's not really, there's nothing warranting additional lanes or additional traffic or anything there, I guess is the point. As TxDOT ever addresses that, we'll definitely be a part of that conversation and see if there's anything that they might want to do. Dedicating turn lanes, something like that is something we could see in the future, but more so on 4th than on 23rd where there's already 2 lanes each way.
You want to mention brick streets?
Yes, brick streets is something that has been a problem forever and will be in the city of Canyon because we have so many blocks of them. Something we want to address, and there is a plan in place to do so. I know that Chris is planning to bring a report on that soon to the commission. I know we've met several times on what we think the proper recommendations would be. And so definitely be looking forward to that presentation from Chris as to what we could see the future of brick streets being in the city of Canyon. Absolutely. Page 8, we kind of start to get into some complete streets treatments and future projects. That's not something we've necessarily done to date, but something that we'd love to see. It's part of our comprehensive planning goals, that as we start to do new overlays or street redesigns, we look at things in addition to just traffic travel lanes for cars. That might look like bike lanes, it might look like improving sidewalks, things like that. On page 8, we've got some thoroughfare planning with regional and state agencies. That's going to be ongoing. We always want to be a part of those conversations with those agencies as they do work inside the city or things that relate with the city of Canyon in between here and Amarillo and other surrounding municipalities. Chapter 5 is on utility and infrastructure. Go ahead.
One of those, as y'all know, on 8 does address 2590 congestion in the corridor study. I know Mr. Reese and myself have really pressed with the Amarillo area MPO to make that a priority status. We initiated that, I believe it was 12 or 11 on the list, Dan, and it has made it all the way up to number 2 on the list, which prompted the intersection improvements that are coming. And we are 2 of the intersections, Hunsley and Rockwell, I would say. I mean, Hunsley and West Country Club.
Country Club,
Excuse me, are 2 of them. So, just one thing that we have really pushed at the MPO level to try to address some of that. So they are doing middle turn lanes on that, Dan. Is that correct?
Yes, there'll be turn lanes at all the intersections, except for McCormick.
And Lucas,
I think maybe sundown. And they'll be signalized as well.
while we're on the MPO, you submitted some other projects just recently, MPO, which would fill some of these categories.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've submitted some multimodal projects to new funding that's available through our MPO. Didn't score super high, but we're not surprised by that.
But that was associated with sidewalks?
Yeah, so multimodal is anything including and in addition to traveling by your own personal vehicle. And that would include transit and things like that too that we don't have available here. But for us, we focused a lot on sidewalks and bike lanes.
And again, we didn't score real well on those to begin with, but we're in the queue.
Mhm.
And now the MPO includes us, and we want we're going to continue to attempt to educate that process and to say that Amarillo is not the only member of the MPO and that Canyon needs to be also see some of those funds and see some of those projects. They have larger projects, I get it, but we want to make sure that we're included there. Dan is on the committee that works with that, and Dan has already expressed our concern, and we'll work toward getting us some of those MPO funds, which would meet several of these.
Right, the projects we submitted initially were focused solely on downtown. One of our highest priority is to figure out how to help safely get people and bikes across the train tracks and across the overpass over 60, because we see pedestrians walking that route every day. So that was one of our priority projects that we submitted. And then the other projects we submitted were in relation to safe routes to school. And we had a great meeting with the school district on some of the ideas we had between the intermediate middle school and the middle school and Crestview Elementary and some of those places where we feel like we could do a better job for the public infrastructure there.
And again, several of those would meet several of these boxes here.
That's
They would
right.
be projects that would be associated with
Those
that.
are all 25-75 match. So if we were ever to obtain one of those in the coming years, we'd have to provide 25%. But from my understanding, TxDOT would assist and do all the design and construction work.
So those would be great.
For infrastructure and utilities, looking at page 10, a lot of completed by formalizing that capital improvement program, so we're glad to have that in place and something that we can constantly look at and update. You can see one that's in process there for impact fees. We have initiated that capital recovery fee study. That's expected to be completed this year, so we're working with Freese and Nichols on that as we speak. An asset management program, that's 3 of our incompleted or no progress ones, and again, that is related primarily to budget constraints. A lot of that has to do with software and things like that and staffing that we do not have at this time. Chapter 6 is on the public facilities. We're always monitoring growth and planning for public facilities as needed. Those are going to be ongoing goals.
We've authorized some of that right now for the engineer to look at.
That's right.
Haven't we not?
That's right. That's exactly what we're doing. Implementing plans for the new police department, that's always going to be in process until we can get that completed. Same thing will go for the fire department there as well. Maintaining.
Citizens Committee meeting tomorrow
Yep.
on that at 11:30.
We're always going to have the goal of maintaining high quality standards for all public facilities. So there's going to maintain that ongoing status. The courthouse is something that we've absolutely initiated lots of conversations with and brainstormed all kind of ideas, but at this point does stand as no progress on allocating any funds or establishing any kind of task force at this point. Implementation of proactive code enforcement, that's ongoing, and we have adopted our new MyGov software that's been in place for a couple years now. Still working on trying to make that the best it can be for this community. Home maintenance strategies, that was one of the goals under the chapter of housing and neighborhoods, that we have a few things that are in progress. We did fund a housing rehabilitation program this year that I'm really excited to start with. The city funded it for 1 home. Our goal is to reach out to other sources to try and multiply that funding source to 3 homes. And that's a program that I'm excited to spend a lot of time on this year. We're going to kind of model that after some CDGB housing rehab programs that are existing. I worked with one in upstate New York, and that'll be based on a lot of parameters, and we'll be coming back to you to talk about the specifics of that program later in the year. But very excited to have that funded and be able to start that. As you can see, the goal established in the plan was for 3 houses, so we're hoping to be able to reach that goal this year through some partnerships. Updated guidelines for single-family homes. We adopted zoning ordinance, and that kind of covers some of those guidelines. Same thing with mixed-use developments and things like that. That zoning ordinance really affected a lot of the way that we will develop development in the city. Chapter 8 is on community livability. One of the first goals is the zoning and subdivision regulations. So we have adopted both of those, and so that's where we've gotten completed on a lot of those. One of the other ordinances and programs that was recommended in the comprehensive plan is a dead tree ordinance and tree removal / planting program. That's not something that we have in place at this time. Again, there's a funding gap there. It works very similarly to the way I described a sidewalk rehabilitation program, which is people who are under enforcement from the dead tree ordinance would be able to apply for assistance in removing their dead trees. And so that's definitely something that John has had on his list for a while.
Well, I believe we're making progress on that today as we speak. I believe there are
The wind is making progress.
some dead trees and
Taking them
limbs.
out themselves.
They're not being removed in an appropriate manner, I'm afraid, and I'm sorry, they may damage things. We already
Force
had,
majeure, as they would say.
we already had a limb down on Fourth, and we removed that from Fourth, and so unfortunately, we probably have that project going on today, so hopefully it doesn't cause damage. But in the future, if we can get to where we can assist people in getting rid of those prior to days like today, that'd be a good thing.
Absolutely. Parkland dedication ordinance and parkland master plan, those are two things that have been in progress. John has put a lot of work in the policy and recommendation side of that, and so that's something we're gonna look at later this year and hopefully can get to a completion status on those. Again, you'll see the dead tree removal program there. Those are kind of in conjunction. Community character and branding enhancements. We've got some things that are initiated there. And then one thing that's ongoing, which is, continuing to ensure opportunities for roadway improvements are considered as we plan for other projects.
And we're looking at that too on the gateways when we think about, we've got some opportunities on 15th Street and 60. And so we're gonna encourage and work with whatever happens in those locations to make them look more like gateways there. And we own some of that property, so we can help with that and just make those things look better. We also know that we'll be designing out on 27. There'll be a canyon sign, a gateway sign out on 27 with all the renovations and things that are going on out there. So we're making some progress on those. Not as much as we'd like, but again, slow and steady. We'll get things done, and we continue to check things off. And Lucas, you said there were approximately 91 boxes. And so if you look at those numbers there on the last page, the completed percentages, we just think of that as, it's about 31. It's 27 or whatever, but if you just round it up to 100, you could kind of get an idea of where we are on those. Those ongoing or in process, about 8 to 10 of those deal with streets. And so some of those are 4th and 23rd. We can't really deal with those. We've
We've had
we've
numerous
had discussions,
conversations with TxDOT.
But it's not anything that we can just go say we're gonna go do right now.
If we want significant improvements, it will take capital.
Correct. We'll have to, they may assist us, but they're not going to do it all. So we're working with them on that. And then 3 or 4 of those in processes are associated with downtown too. So there's certainly things that we're working on. And as Lucas said, downtown, it is brought up at least once a week in the conference room at various meetings. We're talking about downtown and what we need to do and how we can afford to do that, and we're taking steps to figure that out. And I know the Brick Streets has been a concern for 20 years. And Chris has got a good plan for looking at that. We also know that there's no magic bullet for that other than significant funding. And we've got an idea of what those kind of things cost, but we're going to be coming forward with a plan that at least starts to select the streets that we need to think about. Because there's certain streets that we know probably won't be brick in the future, that probably don't need to be brick in the future, and that citizens may not care if those streets are brick in the future. But we know there are other streets among that 42 blocks. That's just 42 blocks that we can see. We know that are underneath lots of other blocks. There's other streets that we know will need to be brick or something along there. So Chris has got a good plan for that, and we'll be seeing that soon. But Lucas, you worked in your previous position, you worked on comprehensive plans, did you not?
Yep.
If you had worked on a plan and you came to a community and they were this far along, they checked the boxes off like this, what would be your opinion of that as a planner? Have we made progress?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's incredible. I mean, that was one of the things I said when I took this position, was that I was impressed that you had this Word document in existence, right? Of, oh, hey, here's what all the goals were from our comp plan, and here's where we are on achieving those goals. You know, there's a lot of communities that go through that planning process and put that plan on the shelf. So, no, I think we're doing very well. In a lot of communities, they adopt a plan and it's for 15 or 20 or 25 years. And here we are 5 years in and over halfway done. So I think we're definitely doing very well on the implementation. And honestly, in 2 to 3 years, we'll be looking at doing some sort of an update ourselves to this plan so that we can address the next set of goals that we have for the city. Does anyone have any questions on any specific items or overall related to the comp plan?
Great work. Keep it up.
Awesome.
Well, if there are no other questions for Lucas, I guess we'll go ahead. Go to item number 12. Excuse me. Okay. Item number 12 is an update on pro rata and draft CISD pro rata agreement. Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are knee-deep in working on a pro rata agreement for CISD on the installation of the 8-inch sewer main to Spring Canyon Elementary. In reviewing the ordinance, it's still very subjective, very open, and we are working to try to make it as simple as possible. Easier said than done. This is the government working, so. We have been working on modifying our ordinance yet again to try to simplify a little bit more in terms of, so we can basically have as little subjectivity to it as possible. And so ultimately, what we're trying to get this down to is, on sanitary sewer side would be a peak flow factor, and on the water side, it would be a gallons per minute capacity factor. And so we're trying to make that as relevant and as equal as possible. First, on what we have now is a little ambivalent, ambiguous, whatever you want to call it. It's a little open, more for interpretation. It didn't quite pan out the way we were envisioning it, and so we are going to modify and simplify it even more. And so we wanted to introduce this to let y'all know what we're looking at. We do have an example or two on this. One's real life, and then one is hypothetical. Ultimately, the pro rata agreement it's initiated. So a developer, whoever it is that puts in some type of water or sewer facility, can achieve some of their financing back if someone can come along and tie into it with a timeline. There is a time period of this. It does have a statutory timeline of 10 years. So once 10 years is up, everything's voided out. And I believe that's upon acceptance of the infrastructure, if state law serves me correctly. And so I've been working on this to try to make it as easy, as straightforward, but equitable. Trying to be as equitable as possible. And so up there on the left side, you'll see the sewer line was approximately $719,410. And so we're breaking it down, talking with our city engineer on, first, we've got to deduct how much that school is using in that sewer line. And that's what we're doing right here. And we're doing that on, can you zoom in a little bit, Gretchen? Yeah, let's look at that one first. And this one's the sewer's based on a peaking factor, not the GPM. But it has a peak flow factor of how much can be used. And so when we discussed it with Adolfo, and he can chime in here in a second, he said that the 8-inch sewer line had a capacity of 244, ultimately. And so that's how much that line can hold. And so what we had to look at is, okay, how much is the elementary school taking up of that capacity? and that was 133.33 repeating. And that was, I'm trying to remember what that was based on, Lucas.
Adolfo said it was based on 20 gallons per person per day with a peak factor of 4.
A peak factor of 4.
So then it equaled to 64,000 gallons per day compressed into an 8-hour period,
Which is roughly
which
50,
equaled
55,
133 gallons per minute.
which is roughly 55% of the line. So what that does is that it leaves us about $326,280 available for reimbursement. And so there's their initial cost at the very top highlighted. And then there it is was per unit we've got broken down there. And then the cost of the school, so that's what the school's eating up, and then you deduct the numbers down to 326. Lucas just threw this hypothetical below it. Let's just say a development comes in with 100, I can't see it, Lucas, your head's right in the mic. So, development comes in with 100 houses with a peak flow per house is 4.25, which is a little more. Remember, the peak factor for the school is 4, which breaks down to, can y'all remind me how the 0.66 breaks down?
0.66 gallons per minute per house.
Per minute
Is
per
the peak
house.
flow. So multiplied by 100 houses.
0.66 times 66, no, I mean by 100, 66. And then there's your, that times what's there left of capacity, and then that would be the cost per home. And that's all on sanitary sewer, and it's all on peak flow factor. That makes sense to you, Adolfo? You're shaking your head.
Kinda. The cost per home. never mind.
Based on this exact example.
It's not per the unit yet.
Right, it's based
Yeah.
on this example.
Yeah, it's just based on this is a, I mean, there's nobody out there doing this homes. This is a pure example based on what we've done. So hypothetically, then, we would assess this as they tied into it, and that would be sometime in the plating phase, I believe. And so, in order, since they didn't have to pay for that upfront infrastructure and another developer did, then they could be reimbursed for that amount.
And Joe, I guess, I'm always the simple guy. The point is, school district spent that much to put a line in.
Correct.
They had no participation from anyone else, so it was fully their cost.
Correct.
When they put that line in, they don't need all of that line.
Correct.
In theory, they could have had, we required 8-inch minimum.
That is correct.
In theory, they didn't need the full 8 inches. There was extra space in that pipe.
According to the estimates from the engineer, they took up about 55% of that pipe.
So now there's 45% of that pipe which is available, 40, that's available to others to tap into.
Correct.
But since CISD spent all of the money to put it in, they're reimbursed for the use of that pipe.
They can be, yes.
It could be,
Yes.
because that's what the pro rata is.
Right. And in the new ordinance that we've almost finalized, there is some human discretion if there is thoughts that it's not fair. It's not clearly, a fallacy if it's being not, the whole pro rata is rough proportionality. It's like, roughly what you're taking up. That's ultimately what it interprets to. There is a factor on that if it does compare to be not truly fair, that there can be some discretion used at that time. So that's kind of what we're looking like on the pro rata to make it a little more simplified. I don't know if I doubt we'll do many of these pro rata agreements. Talking to our peers and higher growth entities, pro ratas are very infrequently used. People more than likely, most of the time, like using the impact fee because they know exactly the dollar amount. So they know if they tie into this, it's a $1,500 per house for water, or $1,500. It's flat, they know it, it's over. They don't have to factor in and give us the peaking factor flow and all of that. They just knows that flat rate. That's what, when we talk to some of these other entities that have this, that's what they said. And then the other part is, a lot of people just wait the 10 years until it's null and void. They don't have to do any, they don't have to pay any at all. So we did do one on the water. Gretchen, you just get the water on over. Like I said, hypothetical. If you had a water line, cost $1 million, 35-30 gallons per minute. One unit costs $283. Capacity used by the development, whoever put that in is $1,200. You deduct their amount for that development, and then how much is left for reimbursement, $660. Then we use the same type of example And then what they did, 20 gallon per minute flow for a house with 200 capacity being used for 100 houses. And then you can see the financial breakdown, 200 per, almost 20 gallons per minute. So. Oddly enough, this actually simplifies it, so. So we just wanted to introduce and discuss this. We already have a pro rata on the books. We're just trying to make it simple and a little more easy to follow. And so that's the goal when we were diving into writing the contract. What else, you guys? I know we spent quite a bit of time. Chuck, anything to add?
Well, you know, the whole concept here on amending the existing ordinance was to find a more fair solution to the simple road application of a frontage foot charge. Because that's not always fair. That's not always equitable to the developer. If you just measure off the frontage and impose some kind of charge based on the frontage feet, that's not always fair or equitable. So what we're trying to do is let it be based on demand, the demand on the capacity of the facility.
That was a lot. It's hard to follow. We will send some more of this out. I hope to bring it back, but slowly just trying to help understand. That's why we try to do some examples. So we will probably even look at doing an illustration in the ordinance itself to help even simplify it more. So, and this may be our one and only, just so you say. I don't think we'll do many of these.
No.
So no actions needed, sir.
Any other questions? Thank you. All right, item number 13, consider and take appropriate action on ordinance number 1198, an ordinance of the City of Canyon, Texas, amending Article 2.08, Taxation District 4 Hotel Occupancy Tax of the Code of Ordinances to provide for the collection of hotel occupancy tax for short-term rentals, and adding Chapter 9, Article 9.05 for short-term rental registration, providing for severability, providing for repealer, providing for penalty, providing for an effective date. John?
Talked to y'all last month about the short-term rentals. We set some fees. Appreciate you all helping setting those fees and getting those in place. The ordinance, Joe has helped greatly. We put together our old hotel tax ordinance along with this, the short-term rental information, so it's all in one place where it should be. We're prepared to move forward with the company that we contracted with to move to online registration and online payment for motel hotel tax and for short-term rental registration and payments. Really excited about getting this process started. It will be totally online. Even as we talked with the service, those individuals that struggle with registration online or payment online have a 1-800 number to call, and they will individually work them through that process at their computer so that they can get it done if there's anybody that has trouble doing it. Lucas and I have met with them Zoom-wise a couple of times. I have filled out the registration form. But being the IT guru that I am, it should be a simple process for me as it was. Actually, no, I'm not, and it was simple for me to go through there and fill out their forms online. So that worked out. Fine. It was somewhat intuitive, as things always often say they are. So I think we're ready to go. Again, you've read, or you've seen in the news, or you saw in the legislature, there's lots of goings on dealing with short-term rentals. Those specifically do with cities that are trying to zone them in or out of specific areas, or do specific things to them, as in you can only have so many in this neighborhood, or so many on this block, or you can only do this, or you can only do that. Cities have found that they are unsuccessful with those. There's legal action involved with that. Our ordinance does none of that. Our ordinance is associated with registering STRs and making payments online. I am unaware of any reports from planning and development or the police department that we've had any issues with short-term rentals in our community. So we're moving forward with this process without requesting to do anything or change anything to them, just giving them a way to pay us and register online. I think that's really about it. I mean, again, we've talked about the process, we've talked about the company that will do it. I think we're ready to go.
We changed a little bit on the hotel tax collection, that was my
Yes.
piece to it. Hotels will move to monthly, right now they're quarterly, and then there is a provision in here for short-term rentals to pay either monthly or quarterly, all dependent upon how much they bring in.
And hotels have all been paying monthly.
Pretty much, yeah.
They have.
Yeah.
I mean, they've all been doing that.
And we found a way that they can do an ACH, the hotels can do an automatic check ACH to have very little fee associated with their transaction. That was their biggest concern on the new software, because they literally, guys, bring us a check. So they write a check and bring it in. And so we're gonna do that, and so I can't remember what the charge is.
I'm looking at ACH as 1%. They'll have an $8 just payment fee and 1%, Gary, on the ACH. So we felt like that. And when we spoke to the two hoteliers, they didn't see that as an issue. They just soon set it up that way as mailing a check, especially the one we get from South Dakota or whatever. I mean, I'm sure that'll be convenient for them to send it that way instead of mailing the check. So there we are. We would recommend that you adopt this.
Move to adopt ordinance number 1198.
Second on that.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt ordinance number 1198. All in favor, signify by raising your right hand. Opposed, same sign. The motion passes.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Okay, item number 14, consider and take appropriate action on ordinance number 1195, an ordinance of the City of Kenyon, Texas, amending 3.01 of the Code of Ordinances to add 3.01.012, prohibiting the maintenance of an attractive environment for non-owned animals and providing for severability, a penalty, and an effective date. Chief?
Thank you. Excuse me, thank you. Chuck Early wrote this ordinance and did all the work here. I just wrote the memo to get us on the agenda, so. Really, all we're asking for is a way to kind of control some problems that we've been having in the city, mainly dealing with feral cats. We have several people around town who will maintain these feral cats and a place for them to live. Feral cats carry a lot of disease and they're hard to control. They reproduce rapidly. We'll never trap our way out of a feral cat problem in the city if we don't kind of get control of these attractive environments, as Chuck called them. I talked to Craig at Planning and Development. He knows of 3 houses that are specifically maintained for cats to live in, to come and go. One of them has burned in the time that I've been in the city. It's caught fire and burned and it's still in a burned condition as far as I know, but it's still a cat home. Our animal control officer has several people that he's aware of and has dealt with that they feed and maintain an area around their home for these feral cats until they get bit by the feral cats, and then we have to deal with the bite and the whole procedure of trying to catch and quarantine the animal once it's bitten somebody. Like I said, these feral cats carry a lot of disease. This will also cover wildlife. We don't have a lot of wildlife. We do deal with some wildlife, and that's generally easier to trap and relocate outside the city. But it's kind of coexist with the maintaining an area for the feral cats, because the wildlife will go there knowing that they can get food there too. So it's just kind of a way for us to gain a little bit of a control over some issues we've had in the city since we've kind of stepped up our animal control program. Chuck, would you like to add anything?
Well, I became aware of this because animal control officer had begun to have difficulties with it. And so, I kind of watched Texas City Attorney's listserv, and we're not the only municipality having a problem with this. I mean, there are other municipalities that have adopted similar regulations. What we'd like to do is encourage voluntary compliance, but in the event we cannot secure voluntary compliance, then we feel like the animal control officer needs to have the ability to write a citation for an ordinance violation. And that's the objective here. Feral animals are a vector for transmission of disease, so it's a health and safety issue.
I got some cat living on my front porch right now that somebody's feeding somewhere.
Linda?
Telling me.
Keeps coming back for a
CPD's
reason.
coming for you. Coming for you.
Pardon me, man, you do live in the city.
So the voluntary compliance, and we'll put it out kind of that, yeah, this is not legal to feed feral cats in, I guess, and try to get some.
Well, and of course, the people that we deal with, that we know of, we'll try to speak directly to them. Obviously, we don't want to just start jamming people up with heavy fines and that kind of thing. But we do kind of want to get the situation under control.
Move to adopt ordinance number 1195.
Whole second.
Have a motion and a second to adopt ordinance number 1195. Is there any further discussion? All in favor signify by raising your right hand.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I really do have a case of that. That takes us to item number 15, executive session pursuant to 551.071, consultation with attorney, 551.074, board appointments, Canyon Housing Authority Board, Parks, Open Space, and Recreation Advisory Committee, Main Street Advisory Board, and 551.087, deliberation regarding economic development, and 551.072, deliberations on real property. And with that, I believe it is 5:45, and we will adjourn into exec session.
You didn't ask for me too.
Are you gonna fire Lucas or me today?
He didn't send me 8 emails in a row.
No, it's actually 22. No, it's not. I didn't even got one. You didn't even got one.
Just one?
Yes, he just got one. Do you need me?
So that would
I need somebody.
So what are you gonna do? Just.
That'd be a whole different deal. We have an ordinance that.
Thank y'all, appreciate y'all. Oh, that email.
Okay.
So
if anybody
I'll beat them. Email that you.
gotta watch your footwork, make sure it don't fly away from you. Oh, that's.
There's a limit, in other words, on how